The search party thought they had prepared themselves for anything the Ural winter could show them. They had been warned about wolves, about avalanches, about the simple cruelty of -30 degrees. What they were not ready for was the tent half buried in snow on the empty slope of Kholat Syakhl. It leaned against the wind like a carcass, its canvas slashed open from the inside. No voices, no movement, no fire inside. They found boots neatly lined along the walls, jackets and mittens waiting to be worn, a flask of vodka untouched. 9 experienced hikers had slept here just days before. Now there were no bodies, only confusion, and a line of footprints leading away into the forest. Some prints were barefoot, others showed thin socks pressed into the snow, as if whoever left them had fled in a panic, half-dressed, into a night that could kill a man in minutes. The searchers followed those tracks, down through the dark trees, toward a frozen riverbed, not yet knowing that what they were about to discover would become one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. In late January 1959, 9 hikers from the Ural Polytechnical Institute in Sverdlovsk set out on a ski expedition into the northern Ural Mountains. Their leader, 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, was known for his discipline and careful planning. The group included engineering and radio students, athletes, and experienced trekkers who had already completed difficult winter routes. Their destination was a remote peak once called Gora Torten, meaning "do not go there." In the language of the local Mansi people, to get there, they needed to cross another mountain. Kholat Syakhl, sometimes translated as Mountain of the Dead on paper, this was an ambitious but manageable trip for a team of their skill level. They documented the journey carefully, keeping diaries, taking photographs, even joking in a mock newspaper they wrote in the tent. The last entries show tired but cheerful faces, men and women pushing through snowstorms, making camp, repairing equipment. No one could have guessed that these would become the final photographs of their lives. The group left the last inhabited settlement, Vizhay, on January 31st, heading into deeper wilderness on February 1st, according to their remaining diary entries. Worsening weather forced them to deviate from their planned route. Instead of reaching the shelter of a forested valley, they found themselves high on the bare eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. As a storm closed in, rather than lose altitude and backtrack, they pitched their large canvas tent on the exposed mountainside. This was the last decision anyone outside that tent would ever be sure of. When they failed to return to Sverdlovsk on February 12th, as arranged, relatives pushed for a search. At first, delays and bureaucracy slowed everything. Only on February 20th did volunteer students and teachers finally locate the abandoned tent. Photographs taken that day show a white, windswept slope. The tent partially collapsed, its sides cut open in long, straight gashes. Investigators later stated that the cuts appeared to have been made from the inside out. The footprints leading away were shallow, suggesting the people who made them were walking, not running. Yet they went toward the tree line without the heavy outer clothing that could mean the difference between life and death. Following that trail, the search team reached the edge of a sparse forest, where a tall cedar tree stood above the snow like a black skeleton hand beneath it. In the hollow of a small fire pit, they found the first 2 bodies. Both men, Yuri Krivonischenko and Yuri Doroshenko, were almost naked, dressed only in their underwear, with burns on their skin and branches broken high above them, as if they had tried desperately to climb into the tree. Their hands were bloody, the bark above scarred and stripped. Somewhere in the wind, in the creaking of branches and the distant howl of the storm, the searchers could almost hear the panic of that night between the cedar and the tent. Searchers soon uncovered 3 more bodies, spaced along the path as though they had been crawling or staggering back uphill. When the cold finally stopped them, Dyatlov himself lay on his back, facing the direction of the tent, his fists clenched with frozen determination. Nearby, hiker Rustam Slobodin showed signs of major head trauma, yet investigators reported no external wound consistent with that level of skull fracture. The bodies were thinly dressed, some missing shoes, some without coats, as if dragged from their sleep by something so urgent that they never stopped to protect themselves from the lethal cold. Search operations continued for weeks as temperatures dropped and snow covered every clue. Not until May, when the thaw began, did rescuers find the last 4 hikers in a ravine farther into the forest. Under several meters of snow, these bodies were better dressed, wearing clothing taken from the others, as if the group had tried to survive together in the trees before becoming separated. What they discovered on those last 4 changed the tone of the entire investigation. One woman, Ludmila Dubinina, was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips, with reportedly no obvious external wounds around the empty sockets. Another hiker, Semyon Zolotaryov, had his eyes gone as well. Both he and Dubinina suffered crushing chest injuries. The medical examiner compared the force required to a car collision, yet noted that their ribs had broken without corresponding damage to the outer soft tissues. There were also traces of radioactive contamination on some of their clothing, according to laboratory tests later cited in the case files. In the dim autopsy rooms, under flickering lights, doctors tried to fit these pieces into a rational pattern and failed. The official narrative, a sudden, overwhelming natural force, did not explain why 9 people would slash their own tent and walk into a blizzard half-clothed, never to return. The Soviet authorities opened a criminal case and sent investigator Lev Ivanov to the scene. Along with military personnel and forensic experts, he collected witness testimonies from searchers, locals, and other hikers, and documented strange details that were never fully explained. Some searchers reported a faint orange glow in the sky above the mountains around the time of the hikers' deaths, though the exact date and nature of what they saw remain uncertain. Others spoke of military activity in the region and unusual tests, but declassified documents have not conclusively connected any experiment to the tragedy. Ivanov's own notes mention that some of the trees near the cedar appeared to have strange burns high on their trunks, as though exposed to intense heat from above. According to later interviews, he was quietly encouraged to avoid such details in his official conclusions. By May 1959, the case was closed with a vague statement. The hikers had died as a result of a compelling natural force that they were unable to overcome. No criminal charges were filed. The files were archived, and the mountain returned to its silence. Families received closed coffins and brusque explanations. Rumors, however, did not stay buried for the families. The horror lay not only in the loss, but in the absence of a coherent story about how and why their children died. 69-68 Many were not allowed to see the bodies for long, and those who did have spoken about unnatural skin tones and injuries that did not match what they were told over the years. Surviving friends described recurring nightmares, guilt for not being on that expedition, and a lingering sense that the state was hiding something. Even investigators were affected decades later. Ivanov spoke publicly about feeling pressured to close the case, quickly saying that some aspects of what he had seen in the mountains still did not make sense to him. Researchers who later visited the site talk about a heavy, oppressive atmosphere, a silence that feels thicker than the snow itself. Since the case was reopened for limited review in 2019, officials have leaned toward explanations involving a small avalanche, katabatic winds, or a slab of snow crushing the tent. These models may account for some factors, like the urgent evacuation and heavy internal injuries, but they do not fully resolve the missing soft tissues, the radiation traces, or the reports of strange lights in the sky. More than 60 years later, the mountain still keeps its secret, and the wind erases every new theory offered. This story is based on real documented reports and eyewitness accounts.